Hey guys, Andy Raffel from eTechnics.com, and today we're building a system. So I guess a lot of people are going to be very interested in this because we're actually utilizing the latest B550 chipset from AMD. We're going to build the system, show you exactly how easy it is to build it up, and then see exactly how it performs. So let's jump in and do this. Cool off with Cougar's Helor 240mm liquid cooling AIO. With a built-in flow meter and a blinding amount of addressable RGB, it's the perfect solution for powerful CPU cooling with astounding visuals. Check out the link in the description to find out more. So whenever I end up building a PC of any kind, I always like to try and build as much as I physically can outside of the case first. So to start with, the motherboard. This is the B550M plus Wi-Fi. It comes in at around $179, and the M denotes that it's a micro ATX form factor. Now processor-wise, we are using the Ryzen 3 3300X, which is one of the latest processors from AMD. Now you will find that there's a little arrow on the socket which matches with the arrow on the actual processor. So it's just a matter of lining these up and slotting it into place. It will just kind of fall into place. I like to just put a finger on there just to hold it into place and pull the arm back down. Nice and simple. So in terms of our primary storage, we're going with the Seagate Barracuda 510. This is a 500 gig drive that gives us blistering fast speed and performance, and also comes backed by a 5-year guarantee. So essentially what you need to do is unscrew this heatsink and take it off. This will also help it keep cool, and with NVMe drives, they kind of run a little bit like a car. The cooler they are, the better they perform. Now included in the box is a little standoff which we can screw in, and also the screw to hold things into place. Then it's just a matter of lining up this little notch with the notch on the connector, putting it in, grabbing your screw, and simply screwing it into place. Once you've done that, you can then take the heatsink that we took off and you can put that back on. And there, as you can see, you wouldn't even know that the drive was there, but we're now going to get that blistering fast performance speed of loading all of our games while remaining pretty discreet. Now, as I mentioned, we're using the Ryzen 3 3300X. This is a 4-core 8-thread processor, and it doesn't really generate too much heat. Now, depending on what cooler you do decide to use, if you go with the standard AMD reference one, you will actually have to take off these 4 screws to reveal the retention bracket on the back, which the cooler will actually slot into. Now, in terms of applying thermal paste, this will only sort of be relevant if you're not using the stock cooler and you haven't used it before, but it's just a matter of putting out a small amount, pretty much the size of a small pea. Obviously there are other methods, but you could go down that route. Now this processor comes in at $120 or around £120, so it's very, very affordable for what you get. So I'm going to go with this way. I just want to try and make things as neat and tidy as possible. Now once you get to this point, you can see that we have 4 screws that we need to potentially screw down. And you will find that because they're spring loaded, it won't actually let you over tighten it at all. Now once you've done that, like I say, I like to hide this little cable as much as I can just to make the system look as clean as possible. So I'm just going to route it around the heat sinks on the top of the motherboard and then plug it in over here on the designated 4-pin PWM header. Like so, and things will be nice, neat and tidy. So when putting the memory in, you want to use slots 2 and 4 on a B550 motherboard. So yeah, it's just a matter of getting your memory, and we've gone with the Team Group T-Force Nighthawk RGB. This is 3000 megahertz memory. It has some RGB on there, which looks pretty damn cool, as well as being pretty fast, and it's going to pair very, very nicely with our 3300X processor. Now you will find on the memory that there is a slightly off-center notch, which relates to the slightly off-center notch on the memory slot itself. So it's just a matter of sliding it into place, and with a little bit of gentle force, it will slot into place. Do that for the first one, and then exactly the same for the next one. A little bit of force, and you can hear it click into place. Now when it comes to the case, we've gone for the Antec NX300. Now any case around this kind of price point, which is about $60 in America, about a little bit cheaper, sort of £50 in the UK or so, you will find that you get some pretty nice features that are going to make your system look very nice, as well as kind of perform pretty well as well. Now once you've taken the side panels off the case, you will find that there'll be a little box or a little bag of screws. In this case, we have a bag which has some cable ties in there, some of the expansion brackets as well, and we get our little bag of screws. Now, because we are using a micro ATX motherboard, we're not actually going to be using all of the motherboard standoffs on here because this case actually accepts larger motherboards, ATX size. So before you put your motherboard in, you will find that some motherboards come with a built-in I/O shield plate, other ones you actually get one separately. So it's just a matter of lining it up. With this particular one, you can see with the branding that it has to go up a certain way, and away you go, you can start installing your motherboard. So now that we've got all of our motherboard standoffs in place and the rear I/O shield, we can proceed to put our motherboard in. Everything slots into place because on this particular motherboard it has Wi-Fi antennas which will poke through the I/O shield plate. Once you've done that, you can get the relevant screws from the bag that we looked at earlier, and you can see that we can just screw the first one into place. And now we're done. So the next thing that we want to install on our system is going to be our power supply. We've decided to go for the Be Quiet Pure Power 11 600 watts. With our graphics card and the hard drive, we are going to need a few extra cables. So these come included in the box. Now for this, it's just a matter of lining it up on your power supply and putting it into place. So starting with a PCI Express cable and then the one for our hard drive and our SATA-based devices. Like so. So now we want to put our power supply in. On this particular case, it actually slides in from this side. And the power supply has got a fan on it. And as this case has this dust filter here, we want the fan sort of facing downwards so that it can at least have some air and some room to breathe. So with this particular power supply, the 24 pin is actually comprised of a 20 pin block and a 4 pin block, which you can just proceed to put it into place and push down. And it can only really go one way because it has a little notch on it. Next up is the 8-pin EPS connector. Some motherboards have 8 pins, some have 8 plus 4, but it's just a matter of put this cable into the motherboard first and feeding it back through the grommet inside the case, like so, before you've even put the motherboard in. On this particular case, it actually has two little cutouts here, which make things a little bit easier. And you will find on the HD audio connector, it's got one of the pins blocked off. So it's just a matter of lining it up with the pins, which is generally on the bottom left-hand side of your motherboard, and plugging it into place. Now with the hard drive cage, it's a matter of pulling it out, and every case will differ. On this particular one, it's actually screwless because it has these little notches. You want to take your hard drive and simply put it into place and line them notches up. So with the hard drive in place, we can take our SATA data cable and clip it in like so. We can then take our SATA power connector and we can do exactly the same, just making sure on the SATA power connector that the notch lines up with the notch on the hard drive. So for our graphics card, we've gone with the Palette GTX 1650 Super Storm XOC. Now what I always like to do on my case is just line it up and see whereabouts it's going to go, because every case can differ. Now because this is a cheaper case, you actually have to sort of snap these out, which does involve wiggling them about a little bit. Now all you want to then do is line it up into place with the slot and give it a little bit of force, and it will actually push into place like so. Hold it where you want it to be, and there's your graphics card in place. Then it's just a matter of putting in the power connector, which on this particular card is a 6-pin PCI Express. And we have our 6-pin, which again will only go one way, and put it into place. Now this is a little bit messy because it has extra connectors on there. So what I like to do is just fold it back a little bit and tie it down. And then you can just get some cutters, lop this off, and it just looks a little bit neater and tidier. Then from the other side, you can try and pull it back through as much as you can just to make things look a little bit better. So that's everything in, and as I mentioned with the cable management, as long as it looks good on this side, who the hell cares? And I think you agree, it does look very, very good. So really it's the moment of truth. Kettle lead in the back, like so. Turn the power supply on and turn it on. And hurrah, it works! So yeah, that's the build basically. I guess now we should install Windows on here, install a couple of games and see exactly how it performs. So first game up is Fortnite, ever so popular, and on this at 1080p epic settings, you'll be looking at around 80 to 90 frames per second. This does mean that if you wanted to go to 1440p, you're going to have a lot of headroom. Moving on to Borderlands 3, on high settings again at 1080p, you're looking at anywhere between 70 to 85 frames per second. You could increase this a little bit more, but obviously you are going to have a little bit of a hit with the frames going down to maybe around 60. Now the next game up is Doom Eternal, which is actually very, very well optimized. You're going to be looking at anywhere from 70 to 95 frames per second on high settings at 1080p. With this in mind, you could move up to 1440p and still get some pretty respectable frame rates. Now, one of my most kind of favourite games at the moment, Division 2. On high settings at 1080p, you're going to be looking at anywhere between 65 to 80 frames per second, depending on what's actually going on in the game. Obviously, with explosions and things going on, the frame rate is going to drop down just a little bit. Now, next up is Elder Scrolls Online, a very, very popular MMO game. Anywhere between sort of 80 to 100 FPS on ultra high settings at 1080p. This is one of them games where if you get into a massive sort of fight, this could actually really hinder the performance, but everything was pretty solid on our system. Now, next game up is Metro Exodus, which is actually a pretty demanding game, but probably due to driver updates and just the way that the game's been optimised, you're looking at anywhere between 90 to 100 frames per second on ultra settings at 1080p. This of course gives you a lot of headroom if you wanted to move up resolution to 1440p or even 4K. Now, next game up is the ever so popular Call of Duty Warzone. It's a free to play title, and on high settings we were getting anywhere between 70 to 90 frames per second, which is definitely respectable considering how big the map is and how much variety is actually going on. Next game up is CSGO. Even though it's a little bit old, it's still extremely popular. I mean, this goes without saying that 200 frames per second was easily achievable, and this is going to pair very nicely if you end up with a high refresh rate monitor. But really, 200 frames per second? Where's 300 at? And lastly, ending up with GTA 5. This is actually a very CPU intensive game as well as the GPU, but we were still able to get anywhere from 80 to 100 frames per second on high settings. So there you have it, guys. For around $800 or £800 in the UK, I think you're getting a pretty well balanced system. Even though B550 is a little bit more expensive than its kind of predecessor, B450, I think you're actually getting a really good system for your money. It looks pretty decent as well, and as you can see, the performance is great. So there you have it. If you enjoyed this video, you know exactly what to do, and I will see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.